Greetings and welcome to the JCC of Metro Detroit online and this afternoon's event, Yiddish Glory, presented by the JCC SAGE Committee. My name is Debbie Levin and I'm one of the chairs of the SAGE Committee. SAGE stands for Seminars for Adult Jewish Enrichment. We bring interesting speakers and events to the Metro Detroit community throughout the year. It's endowed by a generous gift from Sis Maisel and supported by Carol and Ron P. Fogel, Sherry and David Jaffa, Elaine and Michael Serling, all through the JCC's Pillar of Lights program. We'd like to thank the following sponsors for their support of today's event. Major sponsor, the Morris and Beverly Baker Foundation, sponsors Elaine and Michael Serling, JCC's Active Life, JCC's Russian Jewish Life, co-sponsor Shalom Aleichem Institute. We have a really special program for you this afternoon, and we do really want you to join in. Our guests will be taking questions at the end of their presentation, but you can put your comments and questions in the comment box below and text them to the number on your screen throughout the whole event. We'll keep that number on the screen, so don't worry. We'll do our best to take as many of your questions as we can. While you're here at our YouTube channel, please subscribe to the channel. Like the video as well and click the little notification bell so that you'll always know when we add a new video or have a live virtual event coming up. Another great way to stay up to date is our website, culturalarts.jcc.org. There you'll find all our upcoming events and festivals, ways to support our work, and more. Speaking of supporting our work, the JCC of Metro Detroit is thrilled to provide you with free virtual events during these challenging times, but we need your help. If you enjoyed this program and other cultural arts events, please consider making a donation or even becoming a cultural arts patron at our website. Your support goes directly to the Cultural Arts Department, and it helps continue to produce high quality events well into the future. And now, this afternoon's presentation, it's based on Yiddish Glory, a Grammy-nominated album of Yiddish protest music from Soviet Russia. The music we'll be hearing and learning about was collected by Soviet Yiddish scholars in the 1940s, who ambitiously attempted to preserve the music of their time as World War II raged. Their work was thought to be lost for many years, until our guest professor, Anna Shternshis, found seemingly an impossible cache of documents. She worked with our other guest, Psoy Korolenko, to bring back this music to life and create the album. We're thrilled to have both Professor Shternshis and Psoy with us today to share this music and story with us. Please welcome them with me.
Thank you, Debbie, for this wonderful introduction. And hi, everyone. Psoy and I are super excited to welcome you to this virtual reality. And we already see in the comments that there are some people in London. I know it's late for you joining us, so we'll try to keep you as entertained as possible.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming.
And yes, thank you for coming. 26 years ago, librarians of the Ukrainian National Library in Kiev, led by Lyudmila Sholokhova, found dozens of unnamed boxes filled with handwritten Yiddish documents in the dark corner of their basement. It turned out that this was long presumed lost archive left behind by Soviet Jewish ethnomusicologist Moisei Beregovsky, and the documents looked something like that. And this is a photo of Moisei Beregovsky. His colleague, linguist Ruvim Lerner, and sadly I only have a picture to show you, a mugshot taken of Ruvim Lerner when he was arrested for this work in 1950 by Stalin's government. So Beregovsky, Lerner, and a few other colleagues spent World War II preserving Yiddish music, stories, and jokes from Jews living and dying in the Soviet Union, in ghettos, working in the home front, or serving in the Red Army. Most of the songs were created by women, sometimes by they were created by children. So as Debbie said, Psoy Korolenko and I are the first team of an artist and a historian to work with these documents. And these documents are first and sometimes the only Jewish eyewitness accounts of the Holocaust in Ukraine, simply because in many places there were no survivors, or survivors did not live long enough to tell their story. Of 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust, about 1.5 million were killed within the Soviet borders of 1941, and of them, about 900,000 in Ukraine. So the songs that were found in the basement of the Ukrainian National Library were not known before. They have also no parallel texts in known collections of the Holocaust music, not from Warsaw Ghetto, not from Lodz, not from Vilna, and other places where Jews lived and died in Europe during World War II. Some of the documents in this archive are really kind of difficult even to look at, and some of them come from places that existed for such a short period of time. For example, there is a note thrown out of a fence of a Berdichev ghetto. Now, Berdichev ghetto existed only for 10 days. When the German army entered Berdichev, they rounded up all the Jews there, and within 10 days they killed them all. Among people killed within the fences of that ghetto was Vasily Grossman's mom. Later he wrote a novel, Life and Fate, where he created an imaginary letter from his mom, which of course he never got, written in that ghetto. But what this archive has is a note thrown over the fence, this huge fence of that ghetto, which consists only of 3 lines. And the words say, "Don't forget that we existed and how we died." It's written by a child. And then in Yiddish, there are 3 lines that says, "Vergess uns nicht, vergess uns nicht, vergess uns nicht," which means do not forget us. There is also a note thrown out of a fence of Kamenets-Podolsk ghetto, written in a very bad Russian. Now, Kamenets-Podolsk is a scary site known to the historian of the Holocaust, where 26,000 Jews from Hungary and other parts of Ukraine were shot in August 1941. That's where the first massive massacre of the Holocaust took place. So a person who threw out a note from that ghetto, from Kamenets-Podolsk, wrote it in the form of a song. Again, we see that this is child's probably handwriting, and the song is written in very bad Russian, kind of like accented Russian, because the person who wrote it probably worried that if they write it in Yiddish, nobody would be able to understand it. And the words, and you see how the note, this paper that you see on the screen is crinkled. And the reason for that is that, well, it was crinkled as it was thrown out of the fence. And the words say, "Why did you, my dear mother, give birth to me? And I have such a miserable fate that everyone treats me like a second sort of a person and calls me Jude and a Jew," and so on. So Beregovsky and Lerner planned to publish these notes and other materials that they've collected in a volume called Jewish Creativity in the Soviet Union During the Great Patriotic War. I show you on the screen the cover of that book. You see it's beautiful, sexy, like really good to look at. So the volume was already ready for publication in 1949, but it never came out because both Beregovsky and Lerner were arrested themselves, and the project never finished. The manuscripts and the materials for this collection were essentially buried. So today we will share some of the songs and extraordinary stories behind them. Some of them were supposed to be published in that book, others were not, but all of them are from that archive. Now, because we're presenting this program to you in the midst of the pandemic, although those of you listening from the US can already see the light at the end of the tunnel, not so much better that, not so much we here in Canada, but still, we thought that we would pay more attention to how people made sense to epidemics during the war, but we will also talk about other aspects of their lives in ghettos, Red Army, and the Soviet rear. So epidemics of cholera, dysentery, tuberculosis, outbreaks of measles, and especially typhus transmitted via fleas and human lice literally plagued Jews imprisoned in ghettos all over Poland, Ukraine, and Transnistria. In Transnistria, which is an area of contemporary Ukraine and Moldova between the rivers Bug and Dniester, many of 200,000 Jews who died there died from starvation and diseases, as well as cold weather. Many stories and songs that you will hear today tell us about how people made sense of their lives for those scary months between summer 1941 and the end of 1943, especially during the winter of 1941, the coldest in recorded history of European winters of the 20th century. Our first song that you will hear is called Transnistria Lullaby. Let me show you how it looks in the archive. So it was first recorded by Berezovsky in 1945 in a city called Chernovtsi from two separate school kids. A lot of songs in Berezovsky's collection were recorded from children, and I will later explain why. So for now, let me just say that one of those kids' name was Ruth Uplanger. According to Berezovsky's note, she was a student in the 5th grade of school number 18 in Chernovitz, and he also recorded the song from a number of other children. Some from from other places, and another person is El Vinacour, and they both said that they heard the song in winter of 1942. As you can see on your screen, these documents are in Yiddish, and they were written by children themselves on school notebooks. And the reason for that was that when Berezovsky came to Chernovitz to look for survivors of Transnistrian ghettos, when he found them and recorded their songs, he also asked them to write these songs down, the words of the songs down, by hand, to make sure he kept all the words. And that's why we have those unique documents written by kids themselves with the words that they remembered. So this particular song seemed to have been really popular among children in Transnistrian ghettos because it was recorded in 5 different places by Berezovsky from 6 different children, all in 1945. So please welcome Psoy Korolenko, who will perform for us the song called the Transnistria Lullaby.
Laufen jung die Maschinen in es voll der Zug. Mir verjuckte sitzen drinnen, man schickt ins Zebut. Mir verjuckte sitzen drinnen, schickt man ins Zebut. Dorten winkelt der breiter Dniester, schickt Gries mir zu. Find man Mommen in man Schwester, wo sonnen du, scheun du. Find man Mommen in man Schwester, wo sonnen du, scheun du. In dort oben wir gefunden, allen hingeneut, in der schönen Ukraine, jetzt regiert der Tod. In der Scheiner Ukraine jetzt regiert der Tod. Typhus erhält Kingerkelten, durch das Sach gebracht. Deut so viel brengen selten, kein mehr größter Schlacht. Deut so viel brengen selten, kein mehr größter Schlacht. In kein Käfer, kein Matzeve is farins nicht du. In a Sommenrief a Greußen legt man ins Ziel. In a Sommenrief a Greußen legt man ins Ziel. Doch der Sturm dort nicht eibig, en der Krieg. Wieder wird die Sinnen schanen, einsar ist der Sieg. Wieder wird die Sinnen scheinen, einsar ist der Sieg. Und dann kämen wir befreite in der Rolterheim. Lass die Teute, bade Teute, wird aus Leben sein Schein. Lass die Teute, bade Teute, wieder wird aus Leben sein Schein.
Thank you, Pasha. As you can see, in addition to Typhus, this dark lullaby talks about deportation of Jews from Bessarabia to Bukovina into the northern parts of Transnistria. During winter of 1941 to 42, Romanian soldiers kicked out 150,000 Jews from their homes and forced them to walk to the Dniester shore. Tens of thousands of people died on the way from starvation and cold. Many of them ended up in a ghetto of Bershut, located in the Vinnytsia region of Ukraine. It's a little bit more photographs of Bershut, both of today and of the time. Many of these people lived under the constant threat of death from hunger, infectious diseases, and harassment from the Romanian police. One survivor of Bershut ghetto, Frida Muchnik, mentioned that ghetto life was especially tough for girls who were, as she said in her interview recorded in the early 2000s for the Censorship project, the girls were abused in a beastly manner. She survived because her mom hid her from the very beginning in the basement of their house. She was not registered anywhere. And the mom kept bribing the members of the Jewish council so that they do not search her house for extra occupants. She bribed them when they came anyway. Bribery was a part of everyday life in Bershut ghetto, bribing members of the Jewish council, bribing members of Romanian police, Jewish ghetto police, and more and more and more people. So our next song was recorded from an 18-year-old woman named Genya Soifer. I wish I could show you the photograph, but all I have left of her is this document. She was 18 in 1945. And she was also a prisoner in Bershut ghetto, about the same age, I think, as Frida Muchnik. And she heard and sang this song that you're about to hear there in 1942. And again, when Berigovsky came to interview her in 1945, she wrote the words down for him. While Frida Muchnik could not remember the names of Jewish council members in Bershut ghetto who took bribes in 2002, Genya Soifer's song spared no details on who exactly took the bribes and why, and also what she wished on them. So please welcome back Psoy Korolenko with the song In the Cold Days.
In de tag, in de kalte, hat man me genehmen kein balte, tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Bin ich sich von dort entlaufen, hat man mich in der Heim getroffen, tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Wie ich kim nur an der Ter, hab me bald der Plutoner. Ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Du Adriatina Ter, hab mich bald der Gendarmer. Ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Hat man das gezeigt, geniemen mich in Waldsavram geschickt. Tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Bin ich doch von dort entlaufen, hat man mich daheim getroffen. Tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Wie ich me klappt den Teer, sie gehen Polizianten auf ihr. Tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Fin im Bettel in Sekretel ist gewesen a größter Schreckl. Tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Der Elmut, der Sekretär, schreit sich jeden Git Chabar. Tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Wilnitz ist doch sich nicht stolz, hakt in Präture Holz. Tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Wilnitz ist doch bei sich stolz, habt in Präture Holz. Tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Der Elmutter, der Kurnoser, trugen bald ja nemmer Wasser. Tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Dus Chabarot, die genehmen, in kein bald ja dir gekiemen. Tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra. Dus Chabarot, die genehmen, in kein bald ja dir gekiemen. Tra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra.
Thank you, Pasha. In case you were wondering, and I hope you could read the translation of that song on the screen, Perel Mutter mentioned in the song was a businessman from Bukovina, himself deported to Bershad in the fall of 1941, and he was in charge of food distribution rations, so of course he got a lot of hate his way. One of the scariest places in Transnistria was a camp named Pechora. Located in the town with the same name in Vinnytsia region of Ukraine. Romanians occupied that beautiful town known as Switzerland of Ukraine at the end of July of 1941, and in September 1941, the Romanian authorities converted the summer estate of the aristocratic Count Potocki in Pechora, which was at that time a former sanatorium for the Red Army officers, into a death camp for Jews. It was fenced, hard to get out, and above all, no food was delivered there. So most people just died from starvation. 4,000 people died there between 1941 and 43, and others on the way there. Prisoners called this place Dead Loop, referring to the closed fences and also to the fact that it was on a high, steep shore of the River Bug, which you can see on your slide. There are no photos of Pechora from the time from 1945, but there are many of the present. In fact, the photos that you're seeing now, I found most of them on TripAdvisor. So after some time, this beautiful site returned to its original function. It is now a sanatorium, spa, advertising, massages, walks, and unique climate influenced by rivers and pines around it. There is a little plaque at the entrance of the sanatorium that you can see, this white and black thing, and it's hidden a little not to upset vacationers, commemorates what happened there 70 years ago when thousands of Jews from nearby Tulchin, Bratslav, Zhabokhrich, and other places in Ukraine were deported there only to die from typhus, starvation, and hunger. Songs call it the place from where no one comes back alive. And on the other side here in the photograph, you see a small sign in a forest, which is of the mass graves, written in Russian brotherly graves. Many Pechora prisoners were children. They were essentially lifelines for adults who were also imprisoned there, because sometimes those kids were able to smuggle outside of the camp and beg in nearby villages. They were able to climb down to get water from the river Bug. Some of them were also the ones who lived to tell the story of how their parents died. One of those kids, whose name was Yosef Broverman, I don't have a photo to show you, came to Pechora from Tulchin. But I will show you a photograph of Tulchin. It's a town not far from Pechora, a few miles away. And, it's not how we usually imagine towns in Ukraine, but here you go with this palace, with these beautiful buildings. Yosef lost his parents in Pechora, who died from typhus there in 1942. And on the day when it happened, he wrote a song about this, and in which he wanted to commemorate his parents, but also his beautiful town of Tulchin. In the song that you were about to hear, he talks about the road upon which people from Tulchin walked to Pechora. So I want to show you the photograph of that road. My classmate from high school, actually Nikolai Gotza, is from Tulchin. And when we talked about this project, he says to me, wait a second, I grew up on that street on which people walked to Pechora. So he took a photograph of that street for me. So you can look at this photograph on your left. And on the right is the site of the vegetable processing plant which was just built in 1940. So this is what Yosef and thousands of people like him saw as their last, last before they left Tulchin. And they call it the road of death from Tulchin to Pechora. So please welcome back Psoy with this song by Yosef Broverman called Tulchin.
Kommt heute einmal noch der Monen, unser früher dicke Zeit, unser Masel, unser Leben, was hat uns amol gescheit. Unser Mucke, unser Weinen, on Ashir und on Anek, oi oi meine junge Jorn, gehen jetzt beim Deutsch weg. Nur die junge Bäumer wachsen, Zweigen werden grün. Ot amol so gezwittert unser Leben in Tulchin. Kommt die Zeit und von die Bäumer flieht der Scheinherz wieder ab. Punkt so das lichte Leben geht bei uns ein zweiter ab. Wo du stehst nicht, wo du gehst nicht, on Ashir und on Anek, es wird noch scheinen unser Leben, in die früher dicke Tag. Hoi die Elde Jesäum im Blonschen sich allein nach und das blutig Wort gestorben, wo du kommst, Isumetu. Menschen fallen wie die Fliegen, nur verhungert und verkehlt. Unser Mucke, unser Zorn, wissen wir der ganze Welt. Keinmal soll nicht sein verfallen, das schuldig Yiddish Blut. wo se wird sind vergessen in Europa beim Bandit. Nor derweil se gäumen Menschen in Pecere auf dem Weg, los uns scheinen das Licht die Kleben, find die Frieger die Tag. La mir entfernt die Merden wieder mit der Winterstand. La mir Brüder sei besorgen mit Windhofkes in der Hand.
Thank you, Pasha. And I wonder, I'm sure some of you are wondering, what is this tune? And did Yosef Braverman in Pechora camp came up with this? So, of course, the tune comes from Alfred Schnittke, a composer who was born after the war, of German and Jewish background, Soviet composer. And the song is actually from a popular film, from a popular TV series in Russia in 1978 that talks about the destruction of a village from plague. So Psoy decided to set it up to that tune because the story of a lost life and a ballad of plague that takes away human happiness resonated for us. But the thing is, and I will talk a little bit more about this later, the archive came to us as a complete mess. So what it meant is that sometimes we found the words of the song and we thought that it came to us without the music. And sometimes we found that we found the tune later. So this is one of those examples. We found the song first without any music attached to it, and Psoy set it to Schnittke, and this is what you heard. But later we found the original tune. And when we found the original tune that Yosef Braverman sang it to, we were taken aback because that tune was nothing what we expected. It was cheerful, it was happy, and it came from a Russian Cossack folk song. So I was wondering if Pasha can show us just for a little bit how that that sounded, and just to give you a sense what it should be authentically like.
Kommt heute einmal noch der Monen, unser früher dicke Zeit, unser Mosel, unser Leben, was hat uns amul gescheint, unser Mucke, unser Weinen, ona Schir und ona Neck, oi, oi, meine junge Jorn, gehen jetzt beim Deutscher weg. Oi, oi, meine junge Jorn, gehen jetzt beim Deutscher weg.
Thank you, Pasha. As you could see, that tune is not sad. In fact, it is a Cossack song. It's a Russian popular song. Those of you who come from the same generation as we do might remember it as a song that students like. It's a drinking song, but before that, it was a popular tune sang from all media in Germany. This was a German a pilot march at that time. So what probably happened was that Yosef Braverman, who probably spoke Yiddish every day, was not familiar with that tune, heard it somewhere, maybe from a German radio, maybe he heard it from a neighbor, or maybe he just knew that song and it associated with power of might, and the song of destruction of Tulchin seemed to fit that tune of power and strength. So this today, like reconstructing this to that tune would have seemed really kind of disrespectful to memory of Yosef Broverman, but actually that made total sense for him at that time. And somebody is asking me in the chat, and I promise I will answer those questions later, so keep them coming, if Yosef Broverman survived the war. So I do want to say that I spent a lot of time and effort trying to locate people who sang those songs for Berigovsky. So far, I was able to find only one person, and it was not Yosef Broverman, and none of this, names that none of these songs that you'll hear today, we were not able to find anyone. But I was able to find one person who sang those songs for Berigovsky, and that woman could not remember the fact that she sang those songs, didn't speak Yiddish, and didn't remember a single one of these songs. So this whole story that we're telling you today is an illustration how history and memory are telling us completely different stories of the past. And I will come back to that in a minute as well. But for now, I just want to say that the conditions in those ghettos were extremely difficult. But some people managed to maintain this military spirit, like even Tulchin songs end on this military hopeful note that one day the revenge will come. And many songs created in those ghettos were actually full of optimism, of celebration, including celebration of victory of Nazism and fascism. Some of those songs were written as early as 1943. For example, the song that you're about to hear next was created in 1942, right after the end of the Stalingrad battle, but collected by Ruvim Lerner in Kiev in 1947, from someone named Urintsov, who survived the war in an unknown Transnistria ghetto. This song that came to us without the beginning talked about how people were hoping that this day, this week, this month will be the last one in the ghetto, and also imagining there, in the conditions that they lived, what the life would be like after all this is over. So please welcome back Psoy with this song called Victory Song.
Seit kommen euch die Ende von Leiden und von Pein. Hat das wird ihr klappen und kritzen mit die Zehn, was ihr sind da so schlecht mit uns gewesen. Da klappt sie Glosen Gläsen und nehmt das Weibel Reisen und geht mit mir a Tänzerle der Fahrt. Weil so viel sich gießen und Bromfen sollt ihr fließen und Nieren gehen a jiddischen Bulgar. Da seid sich mesameach und trinkt je oiz was mehr, weil die deutschen Mörders will mir schon mehr nicht sehen. Das sowjetische Land mit der stalinischer Hand wird weisen, was es kann. Trink je ois l'chaim far der Reuter Armee und wünsche wird sie alle als gesund sein sollen sie und wünscht dem Chaber Stalin soll sein Sach. Heil auf der ganzen Welt ist keiner zu ihm gleich l'chaim.
Thank you, Pasha. I hope your camera is working, because we would just left to our imagination to see your face, and maybe there's something could be fixed. Now we can see you. So our viewers know that it was you who sang it for sure, but we only heard your voice for now. So yes, again, a Kazakh tune, but this one was completely imagined by Psoy. So now, speaking of militant aspect of this song and also this project, I want to talk a little bit more about Jews who served in the Red Army. About 500,000 Jews were enlisted in the Soviet Army, and about 140,000 of them were killed, and the rest survived. And for Jews, it was much safer to serve in the army than for their parents who stayed under the German-occupied Ukraine or other parts of the Soviet Union. One thing that we learned from this archive, and what we didn't know from thousands of interviews recorded from Soviet Jewish war veterans, was that during the war, some of the Jewish soldiers in the Red Army sang in Yiddish. And many of the songs sang about revenge. They encouraged soldiers not to think of their enemies as people, but treat them as animals instead, beasts who have to be destroyed. The person who came up with that slogan was Ilya Ehrenburg, a Soviet journalist of Jewish origin, the most popular, I would say, Soviet journalist of the time, who published an article in 1941 called Kill. And when it was republished later in New York Times, it was written with a little bit more politically correct title, Kill the German. And the article was so popular that many of the Red Army songs in the Soviet Union, in any languages, included lines from that article. Have no mercy, forget there's a human in front of you, kill, because if you don't, then everything here will be destroyed. So Yiddish songs created in the Red Army in so many ways repeated that vocabulary. In addition to that, many Jewish soldiers who created the songs praised their weapons, rifles, pistols, rockets, as they helped them to fight against the army that targets their people. We should not forget for a second that we're talking about 1943, 1944, 1942. At this time, a Jew holding a weapon, which was given to them by a government, is a huge deal, and the Jewish soldiers do not take that for granted. Above all, Jewish songs from the front lines or about front lines proclaim loudly and profoundly that Jews can and do fight as men, and they do it not worse than other soldiers. And again, that notion, that story responds to a widespread anti-Semitic rumor that circulated in the Soviet Union during this time that Jews sit this war out. And this rumor poisoned the lives of Jewish soldiers. It also poisoned the lives of Jews who survived the war in the Soviet rear. And of course, it was very far from true. And but rumors don't worry about this. So songs are saying, no, Jews are fighting. They are cruel and merciless, just like all other soldiers. So the next song that we want to show you is kind of fits into this narrative. It praises the weapon. In fact, it's called I Lie Beside My Machine Gun. Actually, at the beginning it was called I Love My Machine Gun, but it was changed later. This song was recorded from an unknown soldier by a man named Mendel Mann. Mendel Mann was a Polish Jewish teacher, who survived the war in the Soviet Union. He was enlisted in the Red Army, where he served up until 1945. Then he went to Israel, where he lived for some time. Then he went to Paris. He also became a very prolific writer and an artist. And you see here a photograph where he is photographed with Marc Chagall. Marc Chagall drew a painting of Mendel Mann, which he called a Jewish writer. The painting could be seen in Louvre today. And Mendel Mann spent most of the time after the war writing books, memoirs, novels, poems, so many poems. And not a single one of his books or not a single note in his archives has a note of this song that he collected in 1944. So please welcome Psoy Korolenko, who will perform the song for us, and then later I will tell you a little bit more secrets about it.
Лиги хлеб'n пулемет und schöpft a jiddischen Nigen, Arum mir is alt still, nur stu in die grieselig sich wiegen. Arum mir is alt still, nur stu in die grieselig sich wiegen. Der Mond sich mein freilich Städtel, wer hat es nie gekannt? Jetzt dieses Pust an Menschen, seinen de Stiebel verbrennt. Nor sis da a reute Armee, und sie mir a Purim Jod gegeben. Schlag ich die Deutschen, kedei unser Volk soll leben. Es schlag ich die Deutschen, kedei unsere Völker sollen leben. Oh, ihr wisst die Menschenfresser, oh, ihr deutsche Banditen, hey, Pulimjot, viel besser, sollst du kein Deutsche nicht durchsmieten. Oh, ihr wisst die Menschenfresser, oh, ihr deutsche Banditen, hey, Pulimjot, viel besser, sollst du kein Deutsche nicht durchsmieten. Tief,
Yes. Thank you, Pasha. And one thing that I promised you some secrets about the song, which I will now share. So one thing that we have to remember is that when Berezovsky and his colleagues were collecting the songs, they were not working exactly in the atmosphere of, I don't know, academic freedom, where they could find people who survived the war, record their music, write it all down, and then publish it. They had to make choices on what could be appropriate to be preserved in the Soviet archive. Before that, people had to make choices whether it's safe enough for them to sing something like this for a collector. After all, most of the Holocaust survivors who made it in the Soviet Union were actually hiding what happened to them during the war, for the reason that they were often persecuted or at least harassed for being in suspicion for collaborating with the German government. So when Berezovsky was preparing materials like the song that you just heard for publication, he had to make some choices. Are they going to just leave it like this, or are they going to make some changes? So with this particular song, as you can see, heard earlier, the soldier fights to protect his people. But you see, Berezovsky thought that, well, saying that a Red Army soldier fights to protect Jews might sound a little too nationalistic or a little bit too Zionist even. So instead of saying that I'm fighting to protect my people, you see how this is a blow up of that document in the archive where the typed up version of the original is crossed, and instead of saying mein Volk, I schlage und schlage die Deutschen, kedei mein Volk soll frei leben, so that my people should be free. Instead of my Volk, it says unsere Völker. All our people should be free. So in other words, it's removing this motivation of Jewish soldiers to fight to revenge or to protect their people, and instead makes it a little bit more universal. So we had to make a decision when we thought about how to sing the song. Should we sing it as Mendelman collected it and give voice to him and to an unknown person who sang it for him? Or should we sing it the way Berezovsky preserved it? Because had the book come out, we would have never known about those original materials. And we decided, because it's an academic project and we both have nerdy side to us, that we will sing both versions. So now you're among the insiders of this project who know that Psoy first sings, he fights for Jewish people, and then he sings, we fight for all the people. And in some ways, this is the message that really resonates today, because dangers of fascism, of course, are relevant not just to Jews, but to all people. Now, Mendelman, as I said, did not talk about doing this work for Berezovsky after the war. And his son, Tzviman, who lives in Beersheba, has his dad's archive and worked with this. And when I met with him a few years ago, I mentioned to him that we have this materials from Mendelman, and I will show you on the screen how they look like. And I said to him, this is what he's done. Do you know anything about this? And Tzviman said to me, it might be some other Mendelman, because my dad recorded every single detail of what was going on with him during the war, and I've never heard of him collecting songs. And then I showed them these documents, and as you can see in the middle of one of these pages displayed on your slide, there's a handwritten note, and Tzviman then recognized his dad's handwriting. And this again was the moment when we realized that this story did not survive in memory. And even Mendelman, who reflected on his past, did not mention this episode of his life, collecting and recording these songs later. So our next song, it was not written by a soldier, but it is about a soldier. It was written actually by a woman who is waiting for a soldier, her boyfriend, maybe her husband. And this woman's name is Berta Flaxman, who came from Zhytomyr in Ukraine. And she was surviving the war in Uzbekistan. And that song is one of the very few songs that you hear today that were actually published. And what I'm showing you now is that a publication of the text of this song. It's right here. It's words, again, without the tune. And it talks about a brave soldier, Yoshka from Odessa, who she is encouraging to be as efficient, as good of a soldier as he can possibly be. Now, one of the observations that we've had about the songs in these archives is that a lot of these songs are exceptionally cruel, exceptionally full with graphic details of how exactly enemies should be killed. And some of the most cruel songs were written by women. And this song is an example of that. And in fact, you will hear the words, you will understand what I'm talking about. But when we performed this material, this specific song, just 2 years ago in Austria, it was broadcasted in the national radio. There were a lot of complaints from the listeners who understood German, so understood the Yiddish words of the song, saying that the song is full with hatred and it didn't sound appropriate for 21st century Europe. However, of course, it sounded very appropriate for the 1943 Soviet Union, when Jews and, of course, all Soviet people, well, not all, but many Soviet people are fighting in the war. And the song came to us without the tune, and Psoy decided to set it up to the music of Skylark by Mikhail Glinka, Russian 19th century composer. So wildly popular song in the 1930s in the Soviet Union, was performed by Sergei Lemeshev, Soviet star singer, sex symbol of 1930s. And we thought that this Berta Flaxman from Zhytomyr would have wanted to hear this song, imagining her hero as handsome as Lemeshev and as brave as only Yoshka from Odessa can be. So please welcome back Psoy with the song Yoshka from Odessa.
Von der eintiger Milchome will ich Lieder singen, hat die ganze Welt mit die Lieder klingen, wie es ist vorgekommen dort mit Joschka von Odessa. Als hat geschlagen sich mit auf Messer. Wie es ist vorgekommen dort mit Joschka, dem Odesser. Als hat geschlagen sich mit deutscher Messer. Wie hat sehen vor sich sich die mörderische Zores, hat bald geschworen, sich kurz machen die Schures. Hey, Deitschukes, was ihr halt sich verwajner Kehle, was es wird man von euch schneiden, wie von einer Wehle. Drei Messles geschlagen sich durcheinander mit Feier. Joschke hat mit euch gelost und a Keul seit Speier. Hat die Faschisten noch generikt und a Steiger. Hafner gefall dieser Peger, Lema Peger. Fahr die Säugkinder, was ihr rot, lebendig begraben, wird ihr treffen, Hitzles, eier euch kommen ich haben. Weil ihr hat die schöne Stadt, wisst gemacht, Chorev, fahren Lebmeiern, bin sich nicht Chorev. Joschke hat doch nur gewollt sein Vaterland beschützen. Hat an Rachmone sich zerrechnet mit die Fritzen. Hitler muss da sich herabzunehmen. Joschkes Namen wird auf ewig riemen sich und schämen.
Thank you, Pasha. Thank you, Pasha. In summer 1944, all workers of the Cabinet for Studies of Jewish Culture, where Berezovsky worked, came back to war-torn Kiev. Ukraine lost almost 900,000 Jews to the Holocaust. In some areas, less than 1% of Jewish population survived. During 3 years that followed, Berezovsky, Rovim learner Hina Shargorodska went to conduct fieldwork in many areas of Ukraine and even to a DP camp in Berlin. The goal of each trip was to record stories, folk songs that could become part of that book. The task was not an easy one. Holocaust survivors were afraid to talk to them, and because they were worried that they will be persecuted for surviving. And then Berezovsky had this brilliant idea that he would talk to kids. Kids, as you know, are not the best at keeping secrets. And even if kids were instructed by their parents to lie to anyone who asks how they survived the war and to say that they were in Tashkent or they were in Kazakhstan during the war, many of them actually told Berezovsky that, they heard this song from someone in a ghetto or heard it or sang it themselves in the ghetto. So that's how he collected most of his materials. In his memoirs, Berezovsky, however, also spoke of this overwhelming feeling of emptiness, and we also heard it in Mendelmann's song, when he and his colleagues traveled around. Of course, Ukraine was full with people. It's just that they expected to see Jews and hear Yiddish. Jews that they encountered were weak, traumatized, discouraged, both by what happened to them during the war, but also what was happening to them now. Many were experiencing discrimination, now from the Soviet government. They were returning from the army from the time in Central Asia and could not get their apartments back, or their jobs. And in addition to emptiness, what struck Berezovsky was the sound of silence. When the sounds of Jewish music, instrumentalists were gone, just like their performance. Berezovsky, a trained ethnomusicologist, the first person in the world actually to have a PhD in klezmer music, awarded in Moscow in 1943, was desperately searching for tunes that survived. One of such tunes, instrumental one, was called Partisan Lyova. He recorded it from one anonymous musician in Kiev in 1946, and it was Berezovsky's dream to hear it performed on stage by a classical musician. In fact, he wrote to all the composers that he knew, including his close friend Dmitry Shostakovich, asking them to take those tunes from those amateur musicians who survived the war and do something with them, and none of them agreed. For some, the music seemed too simplistic. Others were just worried performing Jewish music in public. So today, his dream, Berezovsky's dream, is fulfilled. Canadian cellist Bev Silver took these notes that you see on your screen and arranged and recorded and played it for us. So today you will hear the world premiere of this song called Partisan Lyova. Jamie will just share it with you on the with us on the screen, please. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Bev Silver, for bringing this sound back to life. About 1.4 million Jews, Soviet Jews, and about 250,000 Polish Jews survived the war in Central Asia. And one of the, again, astonishing things about this archive is there were Yiddish songs written at that time by people who were there, and Berezovsky's archive preserved some of them. We're wrapping up our program, so I will just show you one example of the materials that are there. Kazakhstan is a site of not just steppes, and it's a republic located in Soviet Central Asia, but it's also a site of many jails. Some of the people who ended up in Kazakhstan during the war were arrested by Stalin's government as it annexed parts of Poland and Baltic states. Other people were arrested earlier. For example, a man named Yakov Merzon was a former rabbi from Krivoy Rog who was arrested by Stalin's government in 1937, ended up in jail in Kazakhstan, and then was released in 1942, but not drafted to the army just because he was very sick. He lost all his teeth in jail and he was sick with tuberculosis. So he supported himself by begging on the streets of Almaty. Now, when he was begging, some of the kids, refugee kids, saw him and were harassing him, were throwing like dirt at him and rocks. And at some point, he cursed them back in Hebrew. One of the kids reported the incident to their parents, and the parents went to see who's this beggar cursing in Hebrew, realized that who he was, and hired him to teach their kids a little bit of Aleph Beis, a little bit of Jewish alphabet. As Merzon was doing this work, he was recording songs from these children. Here's a photograph of Beth Silver. He collected songs from these children and wrote them down in the notebook. I put the notebook here for you to look at. Because Merzon did not know who to be more scared of Stalin, who put him to jail, of Hitler, who was killing people, Jewish people in Europe, he did not write down a single name of a single kid who sang a song for him, but he wrote the words down. In 1945, he mailed that notebook to Beregovsky, and in 1946, he died. He was a very sick man. Thanks to this notebook, today we know some songs that kids sang in Kazakhstan in Yiddish during the war. So now Psoy will present this, show you one of those songs called Purim Gifts for Hitler. A lot of the songs were humorous, and this is not an exception. And it's refers to Hitler as Haman, an evil minister whose goal was to destroy Jewish people in ancient Persia. And the words Hitler and Haman are used in that song interchangeably. So please welcome back Psoy Korolenko.
Bist du nicht mein erster Sohn? Ich hab gehad a Sacha Säune noch verschrauben euch dein Namen in einem Zettel, wo hebt sich an mit Omen. Omen, Antiochus, Turkwemade, Kruschewan, oben die Welt verkipest, früher noch von dir. A lange Zettel, Omen, sie's voran, es wird nicht stehen, kein Papier. Hat ihr alle sich hat Ziel gestellt, mich abzumerken auf der Welt, nur nicht aus ein Geschenk. Stalin wird schon kurz nach die Hand. Hat ihr alle sich hat Ziel gestellt, mich abzumerken von der Welt, nur nicht danach ist es geschenkt. Stalin wird schon kurz nach die Hand. Mein Friedler Häus hast du verbrennt, hast du meine Töchter geschenkt, hast du meine Eifel zertrotten und geschworen, mich Häus zu rotten. Nur wild und narrisch ist dein böse Träum, mir will. Leben sei wie sei, dann Sof ist einer von uns Bäum. Am Israel Chai, nur wild und narrisch ist dein böse Träum. Mir will leben sei wie sei, das Sof ist einer von uns Bäum. Am Israel Chai.
Pasha. So one short story that I need to tell you about this song is that you see how it ends with Am Yisrael high on a high note, and I'm sure like you wanted to clap to that because who cannot share the excitement that Jewish people are still alive after what happened to them during World War II. But I have to admit that when we just first found the text of this song, it was typed up already for publication. It did not have that line, Am Yisrael high. Pasha just edited because he felt like it would sound better with that line. So it was the only addition we allowed to this original Yiddish material. But as we kept working with the documents, we found the original. And the original, as you can see on your screen right now, has it loud and clear. This song actually ends with Am Yisrael high. It was removed by Censored, and it was entered by Psoy Korolenko, who heard the other artist louder than a historian heard another artist such as me, and also saw through the censorship. And that's why one of the reasons why an artist needs to work with the materials created in the past in order to tell the true story of that past. The book that Berezovsky, Lerner, and their colleagues prepared with all the songs and stories was never published. Hitler was gone, but Stalin, who the songs praised, changed his attitudes to Jews, and his government began to persecute them. In 1949, the Cabinet for Jewish Culture was closed. That's where Berezovsky worked. In 1950, sorry, I'm going to skip a little bit here. In 1950, Moisei Berezovsky was arrested and was released in 1956. In 1950, you see here, he lost his job collecting Yiddish folklore, but he was hired to work as a choir director at the beer factory, and that's where the photograph is from. Ruvim Lerner was arrested in 1951, and you saw his photograph from that time, was only released in 1956. None of them ever came back to this work. When they were arrested, this archive was confiscated from them and was not returned to them. Berezovsky died thinking that his work during World War II was lost forever. So like biblical Moses, he never got to see the promised land, and he never got to see his songs being performed anywhere, let alone across the globe from his native Ukraine. Today, we wanted to thank him and praise his heroic efforts that preserve the voices of people singing through the darkest chapter of modern Jewish history. Yes, it's 70 years after the archive was closed, but the songs did see the light of day and made it to Detroit on YouTube. We thank Jamie Loeb of JCC Metro Detroit and Debbie Levine from the SAGE Committee who made this event happen. We also thank Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada and the University of Toronto that funded this research. Above all, we're grateful to you for your attention this afternoon. We're going to finish up with the song from the archive that celebrates the return to normalcy when Jews stop laughing at Hitler and their enemies and start laughing at each other. The song was recorded in 1946 in a DP camp, and it makes fun of Jewish relief organizations that work there trying to help Jewish DPs to build a better future. Welcome back, Psoy Korolenko, and thank you again for your attention.
Angekommen kein Berlin, nicht daher und nicht dahin. Und me fort, und me sitzt noch auf ein Ort. Me läuft zum Joint, me läuft zum Reben, kann sich nicht kein Ei zu geben. Oi, sag ne wie es, lieber was wird sein mit uns der Sof? Lieber Bruder, nor bitochen, mir zerschäm noch a paar Wochen, wirst zu sein auf jener Seite. Und von dort ist schon alright. Und im Joint der starre Pios Geht uns nicht kein entferne Vaperos. Me sagt ihm, es a Sochen weh. Meint as es ist okay. Sorg nicht, sie ist noch gut. Was ist da a Bocher von Sachnut? Ist nur ach wat geriat Gitarre, a Zertifikat. Noch a Regen scheint die Sonne, weißen mir schon lang davon. Verliert mir Tage nie den Mut, abi mit Jekes ist kaputt. Verliert mir Tage nie der Mut, abi mit Jekes ist kaputt. Abi Berlin ist stark zerstört, liegt ein Eilen in der Herd, und ich Yisroel tanz und schrei, eure Am Yisroel, hi! Lang wollt noch geben man Lied, nur ich bin schon etwas müde. Es wird sein dein und dein. Litraos, adieu, goodbye.
Thank you, Pasha, and thank you, all of you, for your attention and your patience. I know the program ran longer than the minchag is and the custom is, but we appreciate your listening to this music because we think it's crucial that this story actually gets out there. So. I'm going to see the questions and I'm just going to answer them in the order received. So Debbie asked about how we found these documents and this information. So I came across these materials by accident when I was working on my book on Soviet Yiddish culture in the 20s and 30s. Lyudmila Sholokhova used to work at that manuscript department of the Ukrainian National Library, and she told me that there are all these songs from World War II there, and alerted me to the existence of these materials. And I looked at them. Took me a while to read through, to kind of see the scope, to get through handwritten Yiddish. And as I often say, there's no bigger obstacle to studying Jewish history or history of the Holocaust than handwritten Yiddish. So once I got through all that, I realized that I was looking at completely unique songs with no parallels known to historians. I realized that I haven't heard a single one of them before. And that's when I invited Psoy Korolenko to help me to bring them to life, not just as texts, but also as music. So we worked together, and then later another group of musicians joined us. We did a CD called Yiddish Glory. It was nominated for the Grammy. It was the most exciting thing that happened to an academic project like that. And all the lyrics and all the music of the song is published. You can look it up on the website called yiddishglory.com. And there's also, you can buy the CD. It's beautiful and has all this additional information about songs from this archive. Now, the archive is huge. It has thousands of songs, and I would say between 200 and 300 of them, maybe more, talk specifically about experiences of World War II. So what we're doing right now is that we're bringing these texts, we're working on these texts and creating more and more music from them. And soon we will launch a website called, I don't know how it will be called yet, but the idea is we will sing the entire archive that Berezovsky collected during World War II. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so more questions about coming from Eva Froimovich. A number of questions about people trying to bribe Soviet authorities so that their kids don't serve in the army, for sure. Famous story, again, not possible to record through a Soviet-sponsored project during the war. Actually, it gives me an opportunity to say, how I mentioned that history and memory are telling different stories in this project. There are a lot of silences in this project as well, because songs collected by an official Soviet research institute could not include materials that were subversive to the Soviet regime. For example, talking about Soviet anti-Semitism was off the table. And sometimes people managed to insert a little bit of that message into the songs against fascism. We have a song, for example, about Babi Yar, which talks about injustice and talks about difficulties that people experience in Kiev after the war, but says it's all fascism, was what they actually mean as Stalinism. But you really have to look deep into the wording and to the hints, the metaphors, in order to see that message. So again, the beauty of this material, the importance of this material, is that it comes from the time when people didn't yet have the full picture of what's going on. Maybe they didn't even know the full scope of destruction of Jews. So we learned from these songs what mattered to them and what they understood. We also learn things that they couldn't say. And a lot of these things came out in later day interviews when people were interviewed in the 90s, early 2000s as well. Okay, so I'm going to see more. There were some questions. Yes, and also Eva is asking about Shostakovich. Yes, Shostakovich created a cycle of Jewish folk music, but not based on this material. Shostakovich found those materials being extremely aesthetically low in quality, and he couldn't work with them. And Vygotsky was trying to convince people to say it's not about aesthetics of it's not about aesthetics of the song. It's about people writing this music in ghettos. But Shostakovich couldn't do anything with that. Instead, he worked with a cycle created by Yehezkel Dobrushin, a Soviet poet, who also collected some folk music, and that he found easier to work with, and that's how Shostakovich's Jewish cycle came to be. And also that cycle, as far as I remember, does not include Holocaust music. It's just Jewish folk songs. So it's another story that needs to be told, and it's interesting. Oh, I see that Shalom Aleichem Institute is happy to co-sponsor the program. Thank you, Shalom Aleichem Institute, for your support of this. Super excited. So we're super excited to be in Detroit on YouTube, although we were in the Detroit metropolitan area not so long ago in Ypsilanti, speaking at the university there. And it's always amazing to come back to Michigan and to find Yiddish-speaking crowd and people who could, understand and really appreciate this music. So if you have any more questions, please send them in the chat. And I thank you all for your wonderful compliments as well. So fun to read them, and we appreciate every single one of them.
Well, thank you, Anna and Psoy. We have really enjoyed this afternoon. We have learned a lot about an area and time period that many of us were not privy to, some of the things that you shared with us. So thanks for an interesting, informative, and entertaining afternoon. And someday maybe we'll actually get to see you in person again.
Alibi. We hope so. We really hope so.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
And any of you who are watching and want to continue to support events like this, please make a donation or become a sponsor of our JCC Cultural Arts Department. Thanks again to both of you, Anna and Psoy.